Good morning, everybody. We'll go ahead and get started since it's 8:30 by my watch, so we'll allow people to continue filing in. Again, I'm Justin Schroeb. Thanks for joining us this morning as we continue to get updates from our community, both locally and regionally, and try to explore further our role in the community at large. Today, we have Chris Krager, the Executive Director of the Samaritan House, a homeless shelter and transitional living program in Kalispell for the last 20 plus years. During this time, Chris has worked to provide solutions to the complex issue of homelessness in the Flathead Valley. Fixing rural and frontier homelessness is his passion, and addressing the difficult scenario has led to him to serve on other nonprofit boards. He currently serves on the board for the Montana Continuum of Care for Homelessness, helping neighbors without homes in the state of Montana. As Chris notes, he will root for the underdog every time. Chris has 2 grown children, and Leroy, a German Shepherd that loves kale, apparently, and other interests include Montana and its music while working as a musician with Mike Murray, Rob Quist, and other artists. I'm pleased to introduce Chris Krager.
And where should you like me to stand? So that all right. Okay, good. I see them on the computer there. Hi, I feel like I'm with family today. Samaritan House has known Bev Larson forever, and she was instrumental in my even getting hired as a director of Samaritan House way back. So thank you, Bev. Catherine served on our board of directors, and we also have Michael Blind here too, who is also on Samaritan House board of directors. So we're hanging out with my bosses. So I better be accurate with my words. So Samaritan House is a local homeless shelter and other things too, transitional housing and permanent housing. So we're finding that right now, a lot of the reasons for homelessness is just the scarcity of housing in the Flathead Valley. And I've said it before, transitional housing, affordable housing. You hear all these terms, it just boils down to there's just not enough of it, of any kind of housing. So the boring stuff first. The shelter is a 30-day stay. That's kind of a nationwide mandate. All shelters kind of have a 30-day limit, and it's not enough time. So we have a process to extend 10 days, 10 days, 10 days. And so there's a spirit of commitment to see people through until they're no longer homeless anymore. The true average length of stay in the shelter is about 3 months, 3.5 months, somewhere in there. And then if you need more time, say if you're on a fixed income or have a disability of some sort, we have transitional housing. And sometimes you'll hear that terminology, transitional housing, transitional living program. All it means is there's a case manager involved and a whole program, and we have goals that are being set and outcomes that are being measured. So transitional housing is a limit of up to 2-year stay. So the goal is to fix their homeless situation before they move out. And the true average length of stay in our transitional housing is about 1.5 years. And then we have permanent, affordable, super affordable apartments with no end length of stay as long as you pay the rent. So that's good. We also operate a kitchen and cafeteria, 3 meals a day. And that's always a center hub of activity and lots of things like an outreach worker from the Flathead Job Service comes and we feed him breakfast, and he brings the latest job postings and has conversations right there at breakfast. So that's really, really helpful. And then it's also a good source, a good spot to see a lot of volunteers and people helping. So the way we roll the meals is a lot of the dinner time meals are done by a volunteer group or church or civic organization. Breakfast the next day is pretty easy, but lunch is usually left over from dinner the night before, which is kind of how I do my lunch as well. So it works. So one really great example of how we make the whole place work efficiently is last year we did 38,642 meals in the cafeteria on a budget of about $9,100. So that's because we were able to keep that figure and everything efficient financially, because it's bakeries, restaurants, delis, caterers, food bank network, lots of generous folks all going in, donating, helping keeping all the costs low, so that it helps the residents as much as possible. So the whole spirit of the whole program is to try to fix homelessness. And in last year, our outcomes that we tracked, transitional housing fixed homelessness 85% of the time for the clients we served. I do feel like the Flathead Valley is pretty amazing, and the people are stellar and very thoughtful and generous. And we could probably put together a really great place for people to stay and a really great meal. I do think it has a bigger impact if we just take that extra little bit of conversation and try to help people get out of their homeless situation. It's I think a better investment financially into people's lives, and it's also a better, more empathetic thing to take and have those extra conversations. So we make these black and white rules. Obviously, you got to be a good guy, you got to behave, you got to help out with some of the housekeeping, not a lot of chores, but there's a little bit of chores. We're hoping that you're gonna hopefully conquer what brought you there. So that's all the boring stuff, the numbers, the data. We do the annual homeless survey every January. There's some really interesting data with the homeless survey happens in January all across the United States. It's a point-in-time survey, 8 hours on your mark, get, set, go, survey and count as many homeless people as you can. And we found some interesting data last January. Montana has homelessness in a different sort of way than a lot of the U.S. because January is cold. And a lot of Montana homeless folks are veterans. So we find that in Flathead County, there's a pretty high percentage of the people we surveyed as homeless are actually truly staying outside. The largest percentage in the States, 58% of the people we surveyed were actually camping out or staying outside. And then another really interesting thing happened with the homeless survey data this year. Flathead County passed Missoula, and we have more homeless people than that area. Or I'm sorry, we passed Billings. We're second only to Missoula. So Missoula, Flathead County, then Billings. And we're actually pretty nearly close to the number of homeless people that Missoula has. So it's interesting when you drive around Missoula and you think, oh man, there's a homeless problem here. Well, we have essentially the same number of homeless people here. It's just maybe not as visual because a larger percentage of the people that are homeless are actually camping out outside. So, so that's very interesting. 30% of the people we serve are homeless veterans. Feels good to be able to operate that program. And the clients that we serve with our homeless veterans program are still Vietnam era veterans. So they're kind of getting older and having more medical stuff. And so it feels good to get them in. Yeah, so that's the scoop. Everybody has a story. I think it's a luxury of my work. If I get too involved in the paperwork and bogged down, I get to pick my head up and go actually talk to some of the people. And that's the inspiring part for me. I tell my staff all the time, I really like you guys, but I love the staff, or I love the clients we serve. So let's help them out. And I do see they come back and they volunteer every once in a while, and stop in and check in. And we have always meeting people with new stories that I never heard. So one time, there's this gentleman that we served in the shelter. His name's John. And he is one of those guys that can tell you a joke. He tells you a funny joke every day, and you never hear the same joke twice. And so he goes by the handle Funny John because he's always telling jokes. And so Funny John stayed in the shelter, rented a transitional unit, and then actually did well enough with work and rented a house on the west side in Kalispell. And he would come back and he would mow our yard in the summer and he would shovel snow in the winter. And just as a thank you, he would do that on a volunteer basis. So it was really sweet. And it was really fun to see him every day. Super chipper, encouraging everybody. And finally one day I caught him and I said, "Hey, Funny John, what's the deal with the jokes? How do you do that?" Because I'm fascinated by it. I can't memorize jokes. I don't know. I don't have a category for that. So he told me his story. Finally, he opened up a little bit, felt safe enough to do so. He said, I was 11 years old in Nebraska. 7 kids in my family, and I was the youngest. And my dad said, "Hey, let's go to the store, get in the car." And so I got to sit in the front seat. And with so many kids in the family, being the youngest, you never get to sit in the front seat. So he's on top of the world and it's going, and they drove right past the store and pulled right into Boys Town Orphanage. And the dad opened the door and said, "Get out, you're not my son. Never did like ya." And dropped him off at an orphanage at age 11. And he stayed there till age 16. And at that point, Funny John told me, he said, "Now, the moral of the story is I memorized jokes trying to be a cute kid in the orphanage, hoping somebody would adopt me." And he said, "I fit in really good at the orphanage. There's juvenile delinquents and orphans, and I was kind of both, so they liked me." But never did get adopted. And at age 16, he jumped out the window and ran away. And he was homeless for 42 years. And then he finally came to Samaritan House and found that it was safe. It was a good place to be and find work and then at that time he did find housing. So and then he passed away one day. So Funny John made an impact on us as much as we did for him. So it's a good reminder for me, all the data and all the numbers that I get into my head with, all the numbers represent a story like that. Somebody that has a situation that came up. Frequently we'll see a family and the parents might say on day one when they're doing the intake, "I never thought this would happen to me," or "I never knew this could potentially happen," or "It's not something I planned for." And so those unexpected things come up, and that's what creates homelessness. So yeah, so it's a good thing to do, and it's all the broad and varying reasons and stories for it. A lot of it boils down to housing right now, and we see, say, a single income family or a single mom family that has saved, several paychecks, but still looking for the right place to rent. And so we're trying to hope that they, don't make a desperate move. Don't, go too far out or rent something you can't afford, or, trying to make sure that people are setting themselves up for success. So that's kind of the story there. It comes with other, administrative rules. There are always like other situations that come up that we're trying to learn about and figure out. Like the one that's always fun to wrestle through is service animals or people's pets. Like I love my dog. Obviously, I feed him kale. But I would have a hard time if I had to give up my dog. So we're trying to accommodate pets and all of that. It's 100 people on the shelter campus on any given night, so it's probably not the best place for the dog, but we can try it, and so we're trying all that. The other thing that I'm kind of fascinated with, and when I retire, I promise to do this to all the programs that I know in Kalispell, but it is completely legal to have a service pony, and it has to be 27 inches or shorter to qualify, but I am going to get a service pony for sure. So that's kind of the story. The Homeless Veterans Program is also a great thing. One of the other reasons why I really feel strongly about that program if you're a single female homeless veteran, 90% of the time, almost all the time, 90% of the time, a single female homeless veteran is a victim of military sexual trauma. MST is a big deal. And so when we get a single female homeless veteran, they work with our female case manager, who is also a veteran, exclusively. And so it feels good to be able to offer a safe place there as well. A transitional housing unit, they can close and lock the door behind them. Almost every time we have a client of that nature, the next day she says to our female staff person, I stared at the doorknob until I fell asleep, and then I realized it was safe. So that's an important program to be able to offer, and it feels really good to have good outcomes with that program too. So we do have a big, you may have heard, campus development project coming up. And so we're hoping to address two needs in the valley. Obviously, we need affordable rental units, and Samaritan House has a bunch of tiny units. But we're going to hope to create 2 and 3 bedroom apartments and hope to keep them as affordable as possible. And it's not a mystery to know that is a hard thing to come up with in the Kalispell area, a really affordable 2 or 3 bedroom apartment to be able to help families that are struggling. And then also we're going to create some homeless veteran housing. This is Kalispell is the largest city in Montana with no dedicated homeless veteran housing. So we're going to fill that gap there too. And then streamline some offices and make the whole thing flow better. Michael Blinn has been helping us get that whole design and everything. The cost of building materials and the timeline for access and so it's been a challenge. And so we're streamlining that project, and Michael's been helping us get that going, so that's good. Yeah, so we hope maybe June of 24 to start construction on that and be able to serve some families. Yeah, so that's kind of the scenario there. It's dinner's at 6. If you're ever in the neighborhood, stop in and see the place. And we never have locked the front doors, so that's good. And so it's sort of one of those scenarios where we just try to get everybody involved and make it as welcoming as possible. My first experience with homelessness was not something that I wanted as a kid, kind of in college and such. But you've probably heard this story before, right? I wanted to be a rock and roll star, and I'm a musician and I still play music, but we were out doing missions work here and there, and sort of landed in February 1991 in Portland, Oregon, with an unexpected couple of weeks of nothing to do. On a tour that we were on. And so we rented the attic of Sunnyside Centenary Church, big church. And we got kind of bored after a couple of days of doing nothing and playing hide and seek and running around. And so one of the guys that we were traveling with came up with this idea, hey, let's just cook a bunch of spaghetti and have a free spaghetti night, And so we put little posters up here and there, and what we didn't know is we were half a block from Burnside in Portland. That's where all the homeless folks hang out. And so we had about 50 or so people show up for spaghetti that night. And after doing that a couple of nights, one of the gentlemen, kind of this self-appointed spokesperson for the crew, said, hey, you guys don't know what you're talking about. Why don't you come live with me for a little while? Then you'll know what you're saying and have the right to say the things you're saying. So, and I didn't want any part of that, but my friend Tim took up the challenge, and I told Tim, I said, hey, you probably shouldn't do that, but if you're going to do it, I'll go with you because you can't go alone. I'm going to go with you. And so it was a complete submersion and exposure to what it's like to be a chronically homeless guy in Portland, Oregon. We had negotiated this. He wanted us to dress the part and not stick out. He didn't want to have to explain who we were. And he said, I don't have any money, so you shouldn't have any money. That's an unfair advantage. And so our counter conditions were, if found, please contact, I wrote on my arm. And I brought a little journal, a little diary, and I journaled our time. That's on my bookshelf in my office still, and reading back, it's pretty valuable. But the whole story culminates with a loss. We gave this gentleman the phone number and address for a program that would pick him up and take him to an apartment, fully furnished, food in the apartment and everything. And he wouldn't take us up on it. So as much time and energy as we spent working with him, it was still not able to fix his homelessness. So interesting. It's a win-loss sometimes, but it's not a gamble. It's something that we should do as a good empathetic human, really. Offer people a way to get in and get out of the cold. So valuable, that lesson in my life, in my work now. So that's the scoop there. That's what we're up to. We're learning, and we're still doing it, and we're trying to grow. And if we can figure that out, we'll hopefully serve some more people. Are there any other questions or anything? Yes, Catherine.
Just a couple. What is your relationship with the warming center?
Oh, yeah.
And then also, what kind of direct services do you have for mental illness?
Mm-hmm.
And what percentage would you say of your people have to deal with that theme?
Yeah, such a tough scenario. I applaud the Flathead Warming Center and their work. It's a different kind of program than Samaritan House, and I love what they do. It's also a low barrier shelter, and they are keeping people from freezing to death, and that's great. It's apples and oranges. There's several different types of fruit on that analogy, but like Flathead Warming Center, Samaritan House, the Abbey Shelter, Ray of Hope, all these different programs, and a good, healthy community has different options for people. And so it's really great to have lots of different options in the area. Mental health is an issue, and it's really hard to get accurate data on it, but it's definitely north of 50% of the folks that are single homeless people are wrestling with some sort of mental health issue. And then when you take that to the extreme, like the picture of somebody who's been homeless for a long time, wrestling with mental illness, a lot of times folks don't like the meds that they're supposed to be on. And it makes them feel not so good. Some of the meds even make you gain weight, and that's not always wanted. And so somebody will be in an area for a little while until they feel like, oh, somebody's going to make me take the meds, and then they'll go to a different. And so that is actually creating a lot of long-term homelessness sometimes. So we have a good relationship with the mental health offerings in town, and we'll make a lot of referrals and even help people get there if they need help with transportation. I have gotten pretty lucky stealing staff from the hospital social work team. I'm actually not allowed to ask them to come work for us anymore. But I have one of our case managers is also a licensed chemical dependency counselor. And I stole her from Pathways, and our other case manager is a social worker from the hospital I stole. So we have a pretty good connection and are aware of what's available, and we'll make a referral and help them get connected. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
On that note, because we covered mental health the last couple of weeks.
Oh, yeah.
So what areas for improvement do you see in that besides just needing more help and more?
Yeah. There's some systemic problems with mental health and facilities in Montana. Their reimbursement rates are really low. They don't really get paid very well for what they do. So it doesn't give them a lot of incentive to keep, like, the Western Montana Mental Health and Sunburst in the area here are really in a rough ball game and not getting paid very well. If at a state level, or somehow if we could change what their reimbursement rates to make it more worthwhile for them, it would really help a lot of things. Yeah, so I think as far as Samaritan House goes, in the new campus design and in our new project, we're hoping to create a couple of just empty and available offices and private for folks that work at mental health facilities to do outreach and be at our location and speak privately with people. And so that'll be really helpful too when we get the new campus up and running.
Where is the new campus located?
It'll be at the former U.S. Army Reserve Center by Peterson Elementary School. Super great facility, and it's made out of cement and cinder block, and it'll probably be there forever. And so we have a luxurious space in that there's also 2 acres of blacktop in the backyard that we hardly ever use. So we're looking forward to a new building there. And then like all the offices are like way too big currently. So just put a split wall and make 2 out of 1. So, or something like that. So streamline and make it.
But you'll have housing there too.
Housing there as well, yeah. Housing too, we're going to do 18 2- and 3-bedroom super affordable apartments, and we're hoping to get a contract for project-based Section 8 vouchers from a program in Miles City that's closing. And so then we'll have to have the ability to ensure their affordability. And then we're going to also do about 15 or so single occupancy units that'll be contracted for homeless veterans. So that'll be helpful too.
Do you know if the Veterans Center, or Alex Ferguson at one time, he was trying to develop like a campground western town for homeless veterans, and then he scored the land. On the Swan. So is that still in development?
Still happening. Yeah, they are working so hard to get that big old campus. It's the former Pine Hills Correctional Facility. Now they call it Camp Ponderosa. It's out by Condon down the Swan. And it's a lot of work. And boy, howdy, they are there just, taking it chunk at a time. So they got a building up and running, and then piece by piece remodeling and getting it going.
So in reality, that part from town, is that I worry about that.
Yeah.
Being healthy for the clients.
Sure.
And access to services and stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. Apples and oranges. It would be a good thing for somebody.
Right.
And it might not be a good thing for other clients. So hopefully people get helped. Yeah.
For the 58% that you
Yep.
choose to camp,
Yeah.
do we provide services like garbage disposal and outhouses or sanitation?
Yeah, great question. There are a couple of things like how do you get a shower? So the showers that are available in town, at our admin campus, we have showers. The Salvation Army has a shower facility. The Warming Center will offer showers to people that are also not their guests. So those are the 3 options for getting a shower. Then there's a rotation of free meal nights, Feeding the Flathead and Community Kitchen. One organization does every 2 or 3 days they do a meal, and then the other organization does the last week or week and a half of the month. They figure people have run out. And then, of course, always if you show up at Samaritan House, we're not going to turn you away. I feed hungry people, even if you're not our client. But so those are the meal scenarios. And as far as medical care, the affordable medical, dental, and mental health access is, mental health is Western Montana Mental Health and Sunburst, but also can be accessed through Greater Valley Health Clinic and Shepherd's Hand. That's exactly what I was, thank you. And they offer a free medical scenario there too. I also have a medical exam room at the Armory. It's gone underutilized just because we are so physically we are so close to the actual Greater Valley Health Clinic. So yeah.
One of the things that I found out, I think it was last fall, serving community kitchen,
Yeah.
is that due to COVID, all the water fountains in town are shut.
Ah, right. Yes.
We don't think about that because we can go to our
Yeah.
kitchen and get a drink of water anytime.
Yeah.
And the people that we serve community kitchen to just would take as many water bottles as we would give them because they have no place.
Right.
When you're homeless, you have no place to, even if you have a refillable water bottle, you
Yeah.
have no place to fill it. And they pointed out to me that we're not welcome to go into a restaurant that's full of water.
That's
So
tough.
that's a huge deal, and I don't
Yeah.
know if that's something we should be talking to the city about
Water.
it's time to turn the water fountains back on. I mean, we have this really nice car farm trail, and you can air up your tires, but I don't think the water fountains are running.
Yeah, water, and then also restrooms. I thought about making a list of where the publicly available restrooms are. That's a hard scenario as well. Yeah. The other secrets are if anybody needs a coat, we have coats. I get a corporate clothing grant from Zoomies, the skateboard clothing company. Every December, half a semi-truck load of coats. So anybody needs a coat, homeless or not, or anybody says they need a coat, we give them a coat. They all look exactly the same, so slowly the whole town will be wearing the same coat. But we have warm coats, and those are located at the admin campus at the former Armory there. So if anybody needs, and I drop off a box or two to Head Start, and every once in a while here and there to different elementary schools. We have kid sizes all the way up to big guy sizes. So, and then the other thing is if you're talking with somebody and want to see about getting them into the shelter, because we are kind of full a lot, that there's a better chance of there being an empty bed available, a spot available for them earlier in the day, the better, because that's kind of just how the daily routine works. So we also have a collaborative system here in town with the organizations that are all participating, Community Action Partnership, Samaritan House Warming Center, United Way, where we meet every other week, and we have a coordinated entry system, sort of a community-wide system to get folks in and connected to what they qualify for. We have in the meeting a by name list is what they call it. It's an exhaustive list of everybody we know that has cited themselves as being homelessness. Everybody on the list has a vulnerability index scoring. VI SPDAT is what they call it. And the VI SPDAT gives a score after you answer all the questions somewhere between 0 and 22. If you're homeless, you're usually scoring between 5 and 12. But if you score on the vulnerability testing, you score like 15 or 18, that means don't let this person out of your office. There's a chance that they could go freeze to death or die tonight. So when we meet as a community collaborative effort, we start the discussion with the people that score the most vulnerable scores to make sure they're in and safe and getting connected. And then we take this guy and we say, okay, he needs this kind of place and that kind of place and this kind of application for whatever, blah, blah, blah. Who can help and who can do that? And so we're trying to make those connections as fast as we can. We're also developing, the pandemic kind of slowed it down, but we have the 10-year plan to address homelessness for Flathead County, and we're calling it Functional Zero. And so the term Functional Zero means, yeah, we have this by name list and we're aware of everybody that we know of as homeless, and we kind of got a plan for this crew and that crew, and we know that we need 60 more apartments available, and then we know that there are also these 9 or 10 guys over here that refuse to come in, but we're going to keep outreaching to them. But everybody on the list will have some sort of a plan. to try to address and fix their homelessness. I think it's interesting because food insecurity, it makes sense. America, we have food available to feed the people. About homelessness, do we have housing available to house the people? Maybe not in the flat county, we need more housing, but we can work on it, we can get there. It's an issue that, what do they say? It turns like a glacier. It's gonna be, city, county governments making incentives for builders and all the results from that. Finally, hopefully we'll see, so, yeah. Yeah, question?
Would it be a situation of the more you solve that problem, the more homeless people come to the valley? Like, I think one of the reasons was we really have a high population is it's known as jobs.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. That's a good question. And I've wrestled with that, how to answer that. But even if that is happening, it's still the right thing to do. So I try not to even think about it. Yeah.
Do you deal with high school homelessness?
Ooh, high school homelessness. It's hard. That's a hard one because it's really hard to get data on that. But it is happening. And if you work at a school, the main piece of data that the schools have is the applications for free and reduced cost lunch. So that is their indicator of who's struggling and who's not. I've had a kid on the football team every fall for the last 6 years. And I technically can't serve under 18, but if you're like almost 18 and I say, don't get in trouble, don't get hurt, what's your plan? And check in every day, so we have a big hungry kid on every football team, it seems like. And they are interesting cases because they've hit the point where their family is not helpful and in fact detrimental. And they've said, hey, I'm better off taking care of myself on my own. So it presents some legalities because they're not old enough to sign their guardianship papers or any of the legal stuff themselves, and we're not in that position to do that. So there are some situations involved there. But what happens with the school scenarios is it all boils down to the McKinney-Vento Act of 1997, which is really boring reading. But it has language for the schools and the homeless organizations saying they both should have a homeless educational liaison point of contact person. So Kalispell Schools has several of them, so that's really exciting. And at Samaritan House, we have one of our case managers is the point person for homeless educational liaison. And so their jobs are to make sure the kiddo is enrolled and attending school and has what they need to be able to be successful in school. There's also some language in there that gets a little confusing, but it talks about transportation and the onus falls on the school district. And oh my goodness, it would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And so there's all that said is there's layers of protection in there to make sure kiddos are enrolled and happening. So it's interesting. Then you get them when they're older and they're like, especially our big football kids are like, a great example is this kid, our meal time's at 6 p.m. He might get home from practice at 7:30 and he's ripping hungry. So we got to feed these guys, So it's a great example of making exceptions to rules that we've made, and it's better served on a case-by-case basis. So yeah, I remember eating a dozen donuts and a 2-liter of root beer on my way home to have dinner when I was in high school. So these kids we got to feed. So, interesting. But it's the care and empathy and structure, hopefully, that you all would want in a specific and case-by-case way. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about how you're funded?
Oh, yeah. Funding is a challenge. The question is, can I talk about how we're funded? And it's in 4 categories. The first category, grants. With some like 20, 24 grants. Some are big, some are little. And In the grant category, it's interesting to note that there's no state level funding in Montana for homelessness, one of only 2 states in the nation. I think the other one is North Dakota. So it's a tough go to get grants for homelessness. But we have the bigs and littles, like all the way the federal grant scenarios and Dayton Ladies Aid Society, and all of it. It goes, so that's about 25% of our budget. The other 25% of our budget is we do receive a small amount of rent for those apartments. As a standalone landlord, we would have gone under years ago, but we do receive some small rent. That's 25%. The other 25% is donations. And I think it varies a little bit larger than 25%, but we do receive a lot of donations from a lot of people. Very grateful for that. And then the last category is fundraising. We do have a couple of events that we do every year. The big fundraiser every year in April, the Cowboy Up for Samaritan House event and that kind of stuff. So a little of everything. I'm going to owe everybody thank yous when it's all said and done.
Chris,
Yes.
how's the Samaritan House going to be impacted by the closing of the
Oh, I love Neighbors in Need, and I don't ever play the lottery, but I always consider that they would win it all if I won. Yeah, the one particular way that we've been wrangling with is it seems like a reoccurring thing, but a lot of people lose their driver's licenses or their IDs or they're getting stolen or something like that. So kind of jumped into that loop with the voucher process with the ID office and all of that. That is one way that we have been involved in that. It's an interesting scenario, yeah. So we try to do that. I pay for IDs for clients that need them. You can't apply for a job or get an apartment without your ID, so try to do that. Yeah. Yeah.
Did I understand you correctly to say that the state of Montana does not have any
Yeah.
from the legislature? Is there any way that we, really physically do so much that we could write to them?
Right. Yes.
Say what's going on? We have $1.8 billion in excess.
All the surplus, yeah.
Trying to decide what to do with it.
It's interesting.
This is a crisis.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, and so systems and trying to coordinate systems to change problems, right? So we, as homeless shelters across the state of Montana, we've never really gotten together and said, hey, let's do some media, some awareness, and maybe try to do some lobbying for funding, right? So just last month, we finally got together and formed a different group, and that's called the Montana Homeless Providers Coalition. And so a guy needs more meetings in his life, right? So we got together and said, hey, let's see if we can ask the state to see about creating funding for homelessness. Who knows somebody? Who knows a legislator? And that's going to win in November, and so so we don't know anybody, but we're trying. So we're actually got a group together, and we're going to try to find somebody to submit a request for homeless funding at the state level. I think you talk about Montana values and what do they say? The Montana values are, you don't stick your nose in your neighbor's business unless you're asked. And if somebody's in need, you're going to help them. And I think that's a pretty good Montana value right there. Yeah, question.
With so many of the veterans, homelessness coming from the veteran population, does the military supply funding?
Oh, very interesting. Yeah, our homeless veterans program is a collaborative effort between the regional VA at Fort Harrison down by Helena and local VA clinics and Samaritan House. And so it's called a per diem program. So Samaritan House actually receives a small amount of reimbursement per night per homeless veteran. And so that helps a little bit. And then also staffed by veterans is important. There's a lot of acronyms and lingo and processes in the VA system that you know better if you've actually been in it. So that really helps us to have that connection with the regional VA at Fort Harrison. You know, it's interesting too, because for instance, those, some of the gentlemen we serve in that program, they've been unsheltered, truly camping, staying out, and they were trained by the government to know how to do it. So there is one particular homeless gentleman that I would love the opportunity to serve. He bounces around between Florence and Stevensville, and in the summertime he'll come up and stay west of Kalispell out by Marion. And sometimes when we have an event, he'll come, but he will never actually walk in the building. And they wrote that movie, Black Hawk Down, is based on his life. And so he feels especially burnt out by people because they made a movie out of his life and made a lot of money, and he didn't get any of it. And so he comes sometimes, and I see him standing in the parking lot, and I'm just hoping he'll walk inside someday, but then he just kind of backs right on out of there. So we'll get the chance someday, I hope, to serve him. So that's a great example of what we're trying to do. Yeah. Yeah.
Chris, do we recognize as a society or whatever it is, what you want to call us, that there's a certain number and group of people who will always, for either mental
Right.
health reasons or whatever, always be transient and homeless. And I don't know, so do you set up a special place for them so that they can come and go as they need to keep them alive?
Yeah,
Or
right.
what is the policy or the philosophy?
Yeah, it's tough. You know, some of the guys too, they'll stay out until like February when it's really cold, and then they'll finally come in. And those I get the chance sometimes to serve the guys that I've wanted to come in for a long time. We do a homeless outreach. We have a collaborative homeless outreach team, HOT team they call it. A homeless outreach team is staffed by Samaritan House, Community Action Partnership, United Way, the Warming Center, and we go out on Tuesdays. Tuesday afternoons, not the best time to actually do homeless outreach. But then myself and my assistant Billy, we do outreach 7 days a week, anytime. And so I found it's easier and more productive to do homeless outreach if I know guys are out early in the morning or later in the evening, because that's when they're kind of settling into where they're going to be. And so we do the homeless outreach Tuesday afternoons, and we show up to an empty camp sometimes. So, but we're doing outreach all the time. I'm always got a list of errands and places I got to run. So if I get a phone call, I can usually swing my errand past where I'm going to do an outreach. And I usually bring coats or blankets or something, just so people know, hey, I'm trying to help. And then I have a conversation when I do outreach, trying to convince them, hey, come on in, let's fix this thing across the board. So if you ever see or encounter somebody, see as you're driving around, somebody that may potentially be homeless, if you just call Samaritan House, and with a pretty good location and a description, like kind of what they look like. If it's a face you've seen more than once, I've definitely already spoken with them, but we're trying to keep in touch and do outreach and get the folks in. Yeah.
And I think it's important to say, I have personal family relations with people that are involved with family services and stuff like that. And the homelessness is so bad in the Pinehurst Valley right now that social workers are approving families with children staying in campgrounds.
Oh, right.
And in campers that are not hooked up to
Yeah.
services. I mean, because there's no place for them to go.
Yeah.
So if somebody reports that maybe your child looks like it's not being taken care of, if you're staying in a camper or a tent in a campground, that they can't do anything with, I'm not saying they should do anything about it, I'm talking about this from the perspective of lack of housing.
Yeah,
The lack of
tough.
housing is just unacceptable.
And this particular fall has been beautiful and kind of easing us in. But the last 2 years have been kind of nice like this. But then the 2 years prior, do you remember November had like sub-zero, like 10 degrees below in November, And so we got to get ready for that. At this time of year, I like to do outreach to like the campgrounds on Hungry Horse Reservoir, like Lost Johnny. Some of those are the closest campgrounds you can get to that have no host. There are no host campground. And then I can always find families there that have a really great camp setup that have been there for a while. And the kids are happy and dirty and just running around. And so try to get them in. Yeah. Thank you, Justin. Thank you. Thank you so much for having us. And we appreciate Northwoods. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for coming. So if there's other questions, I'm sure there probably are. You can follow them through me or we'll get you the contact information for Chris directly. So a lot of you already have the number on speed dial, I'm sure.